so I'll call the meeting to order. Up first is the 6th Street West project overview. Mr. Lawrence?
Okay, take it away, Dan. All right, well, you might want to follow the presentation here because we've got a lot of pictures, so it's a little bit more interesting to look at me. So we've got some nice graphics for you. So I'm going to step you through this, and we'll start with background, project background and goals. I'm hoping to cover that real briefly because everybody here knows about the project. Project status and update, we've got some details to show you on that. Looking forward to your comments and thoughts on the direction it's headed. We're going to give you a little bit of a summary on cost and funding, and then, of course, leave some time for questions. So, first off, just to get you into the area here, obviously, is 6th Street from the roundabout all the way down to Broadway. So, the main thing is we're considering this to be your gateway to downtown. It's going to be one of the most important corridors the city's future, so that is taken into account in some of the efforts to try to make this look the part and be that corridor, because you know, right now it looks a little bit like a forgotten corridor. The pavement's coming apart, and it's time to refresh that, and I think we're going to make it look like it really will be in the future, which is a gateway to the downtown. So obviously what's driving this is background of pavement rehabilitation. There's some drainage improvement needs. As you can see, one of the darker days here when that flood event happened, there's water and sediment everywhere. So we'll be able to take care of that with some of the improvements that we're talking about. Pedestrian bicycle improvements is an improvement that we can make, we believe, along the way. That's one where we're working hard to make this work. We'll just put it that way. This is not exactly wired for bikers right now, and we can't make a trail on the backside of the curb fit the way we traditionally would build a new corridor. But we do have enough pavement width on this job that if we get creative with some of our standards and such, that we actually can get a little bit of a bikeway through this segment here. So we're trying to fit that in here with state aid standards, some lighting and security. I know we've heard a lot about it's really dark at night when you're walking that corridor, and obviously that's going to be unsettling. And so we'll see what we can do with lighting, traffic calming along the corridor, speeds. Most local streets you're going to be dealing with speed issues, but this one in particular, you have a nice downhill open stretch, black night. A lot of folks look at that as an opportunity to see what they can do, and so this would try and address some of the calming needs along the corridor, and then visual quality, again, the gateway effect. So those are some of the goals.
Dan, before you go on, can you go back to that? Can you just, for the council's benefit, explain that far right picture, the icing that they see in that, and that you probably see if they're driving up 6th Street this time of year and into the winter, what they're seeing and what's causing it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I brushed over that, but that is a specific part of the rehab that we're dealing with right now. What you have is you've got some water creeping out of the slope, and it basically...
Would that be known as a spring?
Yeah, probably. I know without it being able to trace its source, I'd have to speculate that it's coming out of the hill, and that there's some spring-fed water, or it's leaching through the embankment. And so whatever the case is there's water effectively coming almost out of the grade. It's trickling to the curb line. It's not stopping in the wintertime because it's a constant flow, and what happens is it gets out onto the curb and starts to ice, and then it builds up into the lane, and you create this icing effect that's happening. What we need to do is capture that before it gets over the back of the curb in all conditions. And so there's some drain tile that was put in there, I believe. Aaron, you've done a bit of digging on this, actually. If you wanted to explain that further, feel free to jump in. But ultimately, there's some drain tile. I don't think it's doing its job, and we need to go reestablish a good drain tile system in there to pick up that water. And Glenn, you may have some comments as well. So. Anything we want to add on that?
Well, all right, so pretty sure it's a drain tile issue. That whole hillside's nothing but springs. It is leaching out into the street. There's also a pit underneath the neighbors that it's a gravity feed line that goes right out to the street as well. What is the intention when we put in the new 6th Street? How big of a tile are we going to go with on the backside?
I think we were talking 6 or 8 inch. Aaron, are we getting
Yeah, the current thinking is that we're probably gonna be putting 12-inch behind the curb out there with, area drains to pick up the water before it gets to over the top of the curb, so we'll be putting a shallow swale on the back curb, so the water will be captured before it can just dump right onto the road, so.
Are you gonna put any fingers up into the properties?
So we're going to provide stubs so that the private systems can be hooked into that overall larger system.
It's gonna act just like a storm sewer system, is really what you're talking about, just a storm pipe running down there. I mean, you're getting pretty close when you're talking a 12-inch pipe.
Yeah, got it. That should be sufficient.
Okay. All right. 6th Street, here's the overall layout, what it would actually look like, the limits of it. If you go to the north end here, we're just going to be tying into the existing JCP project. And we carry all the way down to Broadway, and we're trying to turn that corner. And I'll show you with the pictures of what we're thinking down there. We'll say that's sort of an operational improvement is that we're trying to target. So I'll walk you through each one of these. This is the bikeway, or the pedestrian bicycle improvement thinking here. Is right now you have a typical section that's about 16 feet of pavement each side. That's a pretty wide lane, kind of lends itself to, we'll say, speed and parking, and it's a big open road. With that space, we could repurpose that exact same amount of pavement to what's the state aid minimum of a through lane, which is 10 feet 6 inches. So that's a narrow lane. Your typical lane out there is going to be 12 feet. It's starting to become far more common to get into 11-foot lanes for a corridor. 10-6 is down there. That's about the bare minimum that you would typically do. But
Dan, do you know if they have any streets with that right now?
10-6. I'd have to look around. I've used 11 in all kinds of places. 10-6 is about.
Jonathan Carver's
11-foot lanes.
Yeah, JCP was 11, and they're following. We started 11-foot on major corridors like this years ago. We did 11 on Highway 5. That was one of the first times a major trunk highway went down to 11-foot lanes, and nobody even notices it. So this is a step further to go down to 10-5, but it's also sort of a calming effect. You know, when you're driving a narrower lane, you actually want to pull back on speeds a little bit. It's just sort of an intuitive thing. And so the gist of it is we'd be going with the state aid minimum, which importantly does align with state aid standards for local road improvement dollars, and 5'5" is a bike lane. So that's a new, kind of a new goal right now, is to try and make all roadways vehicle and bike friendly. Go ahead.
With using the state aid funding, do we have to put in these bike lanes in order to get that funding?
It was somewhat a part of the application that we're going to make this more bike friendly. But whether or not we put a stripe on there or paint the bike facility, I suppose that's really the only thing that is differentiating this, is that we're putting up striping in there.
Right, but even with that, if we don't, let's say we don't put bike lanes in, do we look at not being able to get that funding then? Is it, or are we still going to be able to get that either way?
I would have to actually ask on that, because I think it could be enough of a change to the application that they might question it. I'm not prepared to say that they would reject it though, because there's a lot of other things that were gained by this, pavement rehabilitation, some of the other improvements, drainage improvements. Those are all LRIP justifiable elements. So if I were to say, well, we're going to pull out the bike lanes, what would they do? I would probably have to ask that question.
Okay, that's curiosity. My other question then is with these widths here, that bike, or the walking trail.
Yes.
So is that on the city, or is that, as part of this project, is that something again that it has to be 8, or can it go back down to the 6? In order, what I'm asking is, to get these grants, this money, do we have minimums that we have to meet? So it has to be an 8-foot trail, or it can be a 6-foot trail.
For a sidewalk, you can go down to, you can go down pretty narrow on a sidewalk. You can get down to 5 or 6 feet for sidewalk. We have to call it walk, so it doesn't have to be 8.
Okay,
and that we're calling it a walk.
okay,
If
so
it
we're
were
not
trail,
calling it
we
a
don't
trail.
even meet trail standards, that's why we can't call it a trail. We can't call this a bike facility, or a bike, they call it a bike friendly facility, cause this 8 foot is not suitable for a trail standard. And it actually has to be 8 with 2 feet on both sides, and it ends up being 12 feet of width in order to call it a trail.
I feel like you anticipated my question there. I was gonna
multi-use
ask, not that
trail.
I'm looking for trail, but just kinda
Minimum
understand the
standards
language
for a
here.
trail is 8 feet plus 2
Plus
foot
2.
clear
In
on
our
both
city's
sides.
standards, it's 8-2, it is? Okay.
Yeah, so that's multi-use trail.
Okay.
Walks can be narrower, and that's why we're calling it a walk, but we're still paving as a trail.
Paving it as a trail, okay. So it could go down less than 8 if we wanted to make the travel lanes a little wider.
Yeah, so you
Because
can,
it's 5 something right now,
Well,
isn't it?
the
We're not
trail
making
is,
a curve.
the trail is back at curb, so it won't, if you make it 6 feet, it's only gonna be on the non-street side, it won't up the street width.
We're preserving the existing curve.
Because the curb stays in the same spot.
Okay, thank you,
Yep.
got it.
yeah,
Thanks.
sorry, I neglected to mention that. We're keeping.
No, thanks, I'm just trying to get a handle on exactly where we're going, I wanna make sure that if
It
we,
would, the trail extends towards, like that ditch
Yep.
section.
okay, but the curb lines are staying where they're at.
Correct.
Thank you, okay.
Yeah,
That
this
helps.
important detail that I neglected, we're really going after the pavement, trying to make this typical section work with your existing storm sewer and curb.
Okay, perfect, thank
Dan,
you.
because we're talking about trails and the walk, do they have 8 feet of width, especially like I'm thinking of those areas where there are the retaining walls?
I think we have some pinch points that get below 8 right now. Aaron, you looked at this in detail.
Yes.
Where are we at our minimum?
Yeah, we're at about 6 feet right now in quite a few spots, so the retaining walls will be moving back a couple feet
So we
to
will
allow
move
for an
it.
8-foot
Yeah.
Okay, so
facility
the
going the whole way
Yeah.
through.
Okay,
Yep.
that's my question, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely not consistent with going down the corridor, so.
We're just gonna, I'm sorry,
Yep.
I missed that, were you just going to be rebuilding those retaining walls when we come back? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yep, so, this is what the plan would do to the road. So, we've got a couple of things going on here. Lylewood's almost a discussion topic on itself, in itself. We are trying to make this a little bit more pedestrian friendly, because you do have some major crossings in here. And so, this is probably just best visualized. This is an area that I'd like to make sure is very well lit, and is very distinct as a place drivers should be coming up to and looking. It's something I'm trying to make it very visual. It's a distinct crossing point on the corridor. You hit the brakes and look. So that's what we're doing here. These are bump outs. There's two reasons why we do this. Number one is to kind of check speeds coming in here. This is still staying side street stops, so stop signs on the side. This still goes through. But it's to highlight this location here as a checkpoint here for the drivers to take a look. There's something different here. Look for pedestrians crossing here. It's an important crossing on the corridor, is what I tell you. And we'd want to light that very well. So at night, this is going to be pretty well lit as we've got it laid out here. And then it also shortens up the crossing point. And so instead of going across the 32 feet of pavement, you're going across at what, 24? It's quicker. It's a little bit safer for pedestrians. And overall, it delineates this as what we're trying to make it, which is a major crossing point on the corridor. So this is the change again.
Can I ask a question about bike traffic on there?
Yes.
So is the bike lane traffic expected to go onto the bump out, merge with pedestrians to cross, and then move out into their own lane after the crossing?
Yeah, the way we set it up now is kind of similar to the way roundabouts are laid out, is they kind of choose. A biker can make a choice. If they're an advanced,
I don't see it, they're gonna go into the lane of traffic.
What's that?
Yep.
They can't go
Up the
around
curb.
bump out, because they're gonna go into the lane of
Well,
traffic.
but that's what a lot of bikers would do. And so I'm saying, what we're doing is they can go up onto the ped ramp and yes, across, just like you said. They could go up here and up and around. A lot of bikers would probably choose to shift and go into the through lane. And
They're going 2 and 3 wide and the road's the way it is, so.
What's that?
Exactly.
I said they already ride 2 and 3 wide and down the.
Well,
The road
exactly. I
anyways.
mean, some of the folks that might be biking on the shoulder Highway 10, they're gonna go ahead and against the road.
Can
Kids,
we,
kids might be hopping up onto the
yeah,
sidewalk.
can we make it, I know you've got the curb coming down to grade coming, I'm looking at the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Going down the hill, and so you've got the curb down so the bike can go up onto the bump out easily. But instead of merging with the pedestrian lane, if you will, can we make the other side of that bump out come down to grade so they're just kind of going up and over easily?
Yeah, just, I mean, make it sort of a cut through on the sides so that
Yes.
make it all depressed, I suppose. Yeah, I haven't done that before, but it's not something I think is illegal.
Okay.
I think I could consider something like that.
I think that might be a little bit easier, because I'm just thinking about me, just as a recreational biker, not biking in a pack or anything like that, but
Yeah.
like with my son, like I don't wanna easily go up and then have to, if there's pedestrian traffic, I don't wanna get in that, I wanna stay outside of it, and I don't wanna have to just go down a curb
Yeah.
to the other side.
Yeah, let me think about that a little bit,
Okay.
because we gotta carry water around it. There's a few things I have to do, but
Sure.
I know what you're getting at. I mean,
Yeah.
just go up and over is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Might, well, I suppose.
Okay. So when looking at this picture and having the two, I'm just gonna call them trails, if that's all right. If everyone knows what I'm talking about. Okay. So the trails on both sides, is it really necessary to have the trails on both sides? We have one trail on one side now. I don't see people, walking up the other side of the street. That would give us, we could still have both bike lanes then, the trail on one side. We could have a little bit wider drive.
This one,
There's a
is
reason for
this,
that.
is this the one you're referring to?
When you
I
say
didn't
this
think
one.
there was
Is
a
this the
trail.
trail that
Yes.
you're?
The one on the north,
The
that's
one-
gonna be an access point to the Hawthorne Ridge Trail.
This,
It's-
is this?
Thank
the-
you, okay,
It doesn't
I'm
go all the
thinking
way
it's
down.
going all the way down, and I'm like, that,
It only goes that.
okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking of the
16
houses on the end, how that would affect. Okay, that's
Yeah.
right, it does
No.
shoot up there, yep,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, absolutely
Did see
right.
that,
So-
okay, thanks.
Okay, so, any other questions on this one? This is a distinct location, so we highlighted this on what it would look like, so. Okay. All right, well, keep moving down the corridor. So we've got, middle of the corridor is going to change, not a great deal, then you're gonna have brand new pavement and a new 8-foot consistently wide trail. Now the big difference is we're trying to get lighting in here, and we're doing the best we can to make this consistent lighting without going overboard. I mean, it's pretty expensive to light a corridor of this length, so we're trying to do the most we can with the money that's available to get possibly some bollard lighting in here, and then a few select light poles where we can. And then
Does the
we're-
light pole on the right side, is that the last one coming down the hill?
Oh, we've got interim spacing, but there's some work to be done on how many and how often that we can put them in. so.
Okay, the reason that I mention this is that, and this is something that was on my list, but, so we have the bollard lighting, and then we're gonna have some of the street lighting on the left, we'll plant the left for now,
Oh,
on that
okay.
side, where most of the trail is. I like the fact that there's one where you go up into Hawthorne, but just because we have, we can put lighting, doesn't mean we have to, or maybe we should. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit darker corridor. It's actually very pretty, I think, at night too. It does need something. I'm not saying we shouldn't put any lighting in, but rather than, we have homes coming as we get down farther too. We have there's a lot of light pollution in cities, towns, everywhere, that maybe we look at lighting the actual, just the side with the trail on it, with the bollards and the light, rather than, and then up to where this Hawthorne connection is, and then stop with them on that side of the road.
I think, Dan, you mentioned, we talked about this at the staff level, the spacing is quite a bit long or greater than what you'd see in a typical.
Yeah, I think we're, in many cases, you'd be 150 feet offset, and we're well above that.
Right, what, you're talking like maybe double, right,
Yeah.
300 feet?
Yeah.
So I think what you're asking for is kind of baked in, where typically you'd see a street light every 150 feet alternating, now it's every 300 feet. Or maybe that's not what you're looking for, but it does speak to that it's not a fully kind of lit up corridor that we would in maybe a typical section. And I can't speak to, lighting standards for streets, if there's any impacts to drivers if it's on one side rather than the other, but
Yeah.
as far as like this kind of impact to the corridor for light, this is good, it would be theoretically 50% less than what you would find on a typical collector, so.
Okay, that sounds better.
Yeah.
That sounds better.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is we've got, like, again, the bollards are really what we're trying to do with the trail lighting. So, these somewhat light the street, the bollards are intended to be frequent enough that you've got some decent levels on the trail itself. So, yeah, so does that address your comment, or is there something else?
No, it addresses it, more thoughts, about it, but no, it addresses it, thank you, you got it.
Got it. Okay, and then we were considering putting in a dynamic speed sign as well. It's one of those
Those are
things
fun.
that, the little blinky slow down that we've all seen a number of times here. So we'll look at the total dollar amounts associated with the project, and that's one thing that could be priced out here as a permanent fixture.
Do you think we'll need it with all the traffic calming measures we're putting in, honestly? I mean, that's the
Really?
reason. Well, but here's the thing, we're putting lights in, we're gonna shorten, the lanes, so.
I think it's
I would say it's a little undetermined as to how the traffic will respond to it. I know it's gonna have a calming effect. I also know that I've clocked somebody going 100 miles an hour on a road that was designed at 35, so it's hard for me to react to that.
You're always gonna have that guy,
So,
right?
that's the type of thing is do we, do we have
Yeah, I think they're gonna go
do we have
100, they've
grant
already
speed?
chosen to go 100 no matter whether.
You're very right. They might be like to see if they can break the speed limit.
Yeah.
The dynamic speed sign, just to see
Yeah.
if they can get to 3 digits.
Oh, there we go.
So, yeah, I would say it's a fair question. It might not be absolutely necessary, but it's possibly another measure. Down at Broadway, we'd be doing some different things down here. Got a stop sign, sort of a broken T intersection. There's only a T on one side. There's almost a glorified driveway on the other side. Everybody comes down, stops, just takes an immediate right. It doesn't quite function the way that driving behavior would want online. So what we'd be doing is trying to get rid of the stop sign. I'm not going to say that this is anywhere to the standard of ideal as to how we'd lay something like this out to begin with. But in order to actually make this function the way it does, you would curve this in, and you'd probably be removing a house. And we don't think that's necessary at this point. It's slow speed. You're coming right onto a small low-speed road. We think we can achieve this with the footprint we have, and we'll say just do a best fit. And so what we're doing is we're getting rid of the stop sign. We're consolidating the ped crossing to one distinct location that would make sense for the peds to get across here. And so we don't have folks going this way and this way, trying to get it to one key location that's well lit, and try and really kill two birds with one stone, is keep the drivers doing what they're already doing, which is pulling
Do we need
the
a
stop sign.
segment of sidewalk on the left-hand side? There isn't one there now. And then,
That's only to get up to the bike lane. That's all.
oh, that's all, okay. What about a yield sign there? I'm with the pet crossing right there, the one where the little people are on the road right now. Yeah,
Here.
I'm just afraid if people are coming down, if they're just, keep right on through.
We'd
You can see it, but-
probably do that with pedestrian crossing ahead signs. That's effectively a yield sign,
Okay,
because they're really only yielding to the pedestrians.
Okay.
Otherwise, they're just following their path, and there's nobody they're stopping towards. Coming from Broadway, they're looping around, and again, the only yield that they actually have is the pedestrians themselves. This T here, they should be stopping and waiting for their gap.
right. So are we going to have, because we do have the stop sign there now, so we do have the slow down before they take the right to come onto Broadway, are we gonna set ourselves up for a little faster speeds coming into downtown because they haven't had to make a true stop?
It's enough of a right angle there.
Yeah.
Because you're not softening the curve that much, right? It's still
No,
basically a right
it
hand turn.
actually is almost the same as what they're doing. I know what you're saying with the stop sign, though, that people get a little bit fearful.
I'm just, people are coming down, if we think 6th Street needs a speed sign enough that we're gonna have people speeding, then that also carries them into the downtown, it's not just going up, right, it's going down as well.
Yeah.
The speed, so I'm a little bit nervous about having just a fast right into town and not having that little bit of slowdown before they take the right.
I share that thought too.
Yeah,
I would want to see that there still be the 2 stop signs.
yeah, I can't do this layout with the stop sign because there's nothing to stop for. This is the side street stop, there's no crossing street.
Right, but we could
So
change the layout.
You
for
could
the
go
sign
back,
too.
well, you go back to what you
Yeah.
have today, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You just wouldn't change it.
yeah, I'm just not sure on this one yet. It makes me a little bit nervous looking at it like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe if we can see some potential signage, coming down the road, maybe that will help, I don't know.
Yeah, with the stop sign, it is this. So that's, you have a T intersection again.
Can you
So-
flip back quick? I have
Sure.
it here, but. And flip again. It's like flashcards.
Okay.
Are you adding a little bit of a curve on that north side?
Yeah,
Am I
we're
seeing
carrying,
that right in the illustration?
exactly, we're carrying that around, that's actually concrete all the way around there.
But it's
Yeah,
curved in
it's-
to make it
it's-
a little bit
mhm.
rounder of a.
It's curved in to make it basically.
Yeah.
Part of the
curve the line.
impetus for this was trying to enhance pedestrian safety. There's a lot of folks coming down from Snake Trail, and they essentially kind of cut kitty corner from
They do
that
this.
stop sign they cut over there, and so we talked about how could we make that a little better. And, the stop sign is a frequent one that we get complaints about people blowing, and so it's not necessarily folks stopping, it's, I think, maybe folks wanting to slow down traffic, which I think the conversation that the council's having is, highlights that. I would offer that though with some signage maybe that Dan's talking about, that's slowing, you're gonna have to slow down kind of intuitively to make that turn. And the removal of a stop sign might end up enhancing safety, because anytime you have a stop sign and then someone doesn't stop and someone thinks they're going to. But again, that's just.
Right, but then we have to take out every stop sign in town because people don't stop. If they're choosing not to stop, to me, that's almost saying more of a, if they're not opting to stop at a stop sign here, then what's gonna happen when there's no traffic control there?
But
Well, that won't give the pedestrians a false sense of security
I
that
know.
the traffic's gonna stop. And if you speak to the homeowner, one of the homeowners on the corner there, they would look at that stop sign as it's more of a suggestion than it is anything else.
And this is, ultimately we'll follow the council's lead on this. When we started talking about it, just anecdotally thinking about how many times we actually stopped there for a reason, meaning like where there was conflicting traffic, because the only reason why you'd stop is for traffic coming from, Old Broadway going up to the former 212, and that happens almost never. And so you kind of have a stop sign there that's kind of, in a lot of ways, counterintuitive to the street sign policy that you're adopting tonight, because you would frankly probably never put a stop sign in there under its current conditions. It's there as frankly, probably a remnant of Broadway going north to 212. So again, up to you and how you want to view it. If you want Dan to do some additional research, but that hopefully provides you with a little bit of background on how we got here.
And I think to your point, what we'd probably do is amp up the signage a little bit because this is a reduced speed curve. So if you've ever seen those signs where you say, a sharp curve ahead, 15 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, something like that. That's the environment that you'd want to have a driver be prepared for. So where they see the chevrons and say, we got to make a quick curve, 10, 15 miles an hour sign advisory is what we'd have to put in this location. I don't have that on here, but it would have to be there.
I'm okay with not having a stop sign there. I think it's a tight enough turn that you're truly gonna have to slow down to get into it, to make a right-hand turn there. And to your point, not that we should remove every stop sign in the city that folks blow, because that would leave us with precisely 0 stop signs in the city of Carver, but I think this is one that maybe it doesn't make sense for it to be there in the first place.
So you can doodle on it a little bit and think more about it, but that's, the line of, reasoning here is, we're either keeping things as they are, which really is a stop based on, well, it's more of a private drive, in effect. And once you take that private drive out of it, there's no traffic conflict.
When the sidewalk curves in this picture, obviously the pictures look just a little bit different. Does that actually shorten the width of that lane as you turn? It looks like the concrete, I guess.
Right in here or right in here?
No, the actual concrete, it's not the bump out, but the concrete right there. So if you flip from picture to picture, it looks like this actually sticks out a little bit further, so it makes almost more of a rounded turn.
Aaron,
Or is it
we're
the same?
pretty close to the same, weren't we?
Yeah,
Around
we-
this corner, 'cause we had to run the truck movements.
Yep, exactly right. We wanted to do a bump out originally, but just with the turning movements, it wouldn't allow for it, so. Because it is such a sharp turn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, we'd be fine tuning it a little bit, but it's pretty close.
Okay.
It's pretty close. And then you can see the overhead. Again, part of the aesthetic treatments would be, all right, if we can, get this undergrounded, that would be the time to do it, is now. So, the overhead power lines would go away.
We'd have to do that on our own time though, right? Grant wouldn't pay for that?
Yeah, it'd be paid for. Yeah, not the grant, no.
Okay.
Because it would be a city funded to the utility company to underground it. So, there's the corridor. There's plenty of other views, but that's probably the easiest way to look at it. So what's the current cost estimate and scope review here? So pavement rehabilitation is one big part of it. Curb repair and modifications. So we've talked about trying to leave the curb in place along the corridor, but there are some damaged panels and some areas that aren't draining the way they should. So we'd replace the damaged curb that really needs to come out. So I think we have about 1,000 feet in there, but that's a small fraction of the full corridor. And then storm sewer in those areas. So that would be the curb repair, drainage elements, addressing intericing and storm event flooding. Pedestrian facilities, walks, that's really just striping and then redoing the trail. Lighting and electrical is where the numbers get bigger. You start putting lighting through the corridor and pet bollards and such. There's some cost there. And we do have some water main replacement that came up as we were looking at this. So this is new to the discussion. When you take off pavement, one of the things that we do is due diligence is anything underneath it in bad shape. And so the water main underneath here is very old. And it's actually some original water main that goes back quite a while. And so it is to the point where if you're gonna take the pavement off, this would be the time to go after replacing it. So for now, it's that segment that is original. And Aaron, what was our age on that?
It was 87, I believe.
It's 87, and that's getting up there. And so it's always unfortunate when you get nice brand new black pavement and you've got some big gigantic trenches cut through it. The Vicks water main breaks, and so that's the issue on that. So that's a fair amount that's been added to the system. So how does this line up with some of the early funding projections and where we'd be at? It's above, but the good news is there's money to be had on the other side of it too. And so it's a higher number, but we're also seeing some more money that we didn't expect here, or we'll just say we didn't plan for out of JCP. And so the way this would work is we've got the funding award, which we've planned for the entire time, that 1.25 million. We'd always planned on about $600,000 towards this project from JCP. It was both from just some stormwater programs for it and storm replacement programs. Plus, we had over $300,000 planned when we set this budget up and bonded for it. It was kind of preset in that budget for this project. Then we also had some contingency that we were banking on for this job because, again, we set these contingencies high enough that it can cover most things, and usually we don't burn through it. In this particular case, we burned through less than we were expecting, and Brent opted to take the bond, the bond premium on JCP, which has helped a great deal, because that expanded our contingencies even further. So once all the dust is settled on this, we're expecting more money remaining from those bonds than we had originally planned. So it's a combination of the bond premium. It's a combination of the fact that we're not using all the contingencies expected, and the fact that we had some of the money already programmed into that budget. So overall, we're thinking about $900,000 was set aside and will be remaining from the JCP project when that job is fully paid out. And then we've got $350,000 that we would say is directly associated with that water main replacement. Because typically when you take water main out, you're replacing pavements over the top of it. It's justifiable to say that you'd have $350,000 that you could tie to the water fund on that effort. And then there's about $100,000 that we're going to say is, we'll say, special capital or other funding source, depending on how the budgets shake out here. There's a lot of things that have to be settled before I can call this number final. And again, it's budgetary, which means we expect things to be less. And so we're a little ways away from bidding, which resets these numbers. But we do think that this is probably the appropriate budget to be planning for, with the idea that we'll reset this when bids come in. And then we have to obviously see where all the dust settles on JCP. We're not doing those payment applications. We don't know if there's any surprises from the county on that. But we've done all of our projections as close as we can, and we think this is reasonable at this time. So a few variables, but this would be our budget and how to fund it. So ultimately, the big thing is right now, it's not new bonding as we are seeing this. So this is existing bonding, and the water fund is through existing sources. The only balance point is probably this 100 at the bottom, and it's contingent on bidding and final scope and such. So the plan and next steps here is we've done a lot to date, but what we're looking for today is review the project layout, scope, and funding plan, and take questions, get feedback. We'd be coming back January 3rd to seek authorization for plans and specifications. So that'd be the next action is doing the contract documents to bid this job. I would try and get this one bid in probably March. It's got to go through a state aid review process, so that's necessary. So that has to be after the new year, and we'll probably be looking at a March bid, possibly as late as April. Construction would be, I'm assuming, we're going to be probably into midsummer, but we could be starting as soon as July or June. Right now, the environment for construction is really kind of funky here. Lead time on materials is crazy. There's a lot of different things going on right now where I'd say we're going to want to bank on a midsummer start.
So for the bidding, I mean, do we want to April seems like we're getting kind of late for bidding, especially with the supply problems that we're having.
Yeah.
I mean, is March realistic to get this out for bidding so we can get somebody locked in?
Yeah, I'm targeting March. The reason why that we have to leave a little uncertainty is because we got state aid plan reviews on this one, and that is something that goes outside of our production process.
Gotcha.
We send them off, and then we have to wait for them to come back and say, here's what we have to change. And so it's usually some details, but it's still process. We need a signature on those plans for the LRIP, and LRIP, as you know, was a big program this year, and that could be 30 days, it could be 45.
Okay.
We're targeting March, but if that plan review goes long, it's April.
What you're saying is we have no control. We're going to do what we can.
Well, we're going to do the best we can, exactly, yes.
I have a question about the actual project again. So the tree canopy, that has a really great canopy as you come down 6th Street.
Yeah.
How much of that are we going to lose? I would like to have, hopefully, not much of it if we can.
Well, for the most part, it's not going to be a dramatic change. There's going to be some areas where we get into it, especially like retaining wall areas. So if you see an area of retaining walls, take a look at the trees behind it and assume that there's some impact in those areas for sure. For the most part, most of the trail, if there's already a 6 or 8 foot trail there, we're just going to be grading into probably some of the lower shrubs and things like that.
So any of those areas, are we going to replace anything? any of those areas?
It's a good question. It's so area dependent along the corridor. I'd say for the most part, it's probably gonna be fairly minimal to modest on this. But, if there's an area where we hit a big tree, we certainly can drop something else in there. I hadn't gotten into that level of detail just yet, but it's a good comment.
Okay.
Not
And,
full-
yeah, I think it's a good comment. It would be helpful for me to know then like budgetary numbers. So then like if there is that possibility for true replacement to know, is that something that we put in a priority where we'd spend the money on it?
We'll
Sure.
just take it from Chad's budget and put it in.
Or should we just dig up another tree,
Yeah,
relocate
we'll just
it?
relocate
Yeah.
a tree.
Chad
Chad, we can buy some trees and relocate.
Volunteer Chad to move some trees.
But yeah, cause it, I guess maybe like a landscaping, to know what contingencies.
Yeah, I mean, we had some in there as a placeholder, but at this point, until we get our probably detailed removal plans cut, where we say, all right, these trees are going, this is a big one, this is a small one, we can plan ahead for some replacements, if that's how you'd like us to proceed. For us, the comment would be minimize the damage to vegetation and replace it where you can. Is that?
I like that.
So just some tee-up conversation for the council. What would be helpful for us is just your comments, a general overview of the scope. Do you support it? Things you wanted to see added or taken out? And then kind of two subsets of that. I heard comments related to corridor lighting, and I heard a lot of conversation on the intersection of 6th and Broadway, so that whether to keep it the same or to use the design that Dan has. How you're feeling about budget, would also be helpful. And then, schedule, frankly, we have January 3rd on there. If you felt like you weren't being rushed, we could certainly move that authorization to your December 20th meeting and kind of pick up an extra few weeks and get the engineering team kind of working on it. And when you approve plans and specs, you would kind of formalize some of your thoughts, so don't feel like you have to, that you have to decide tonight, but those would be some, pieces and kind of threads of conversation that the engineering team would take into their design. And then, as you know, you approve plans and specifications before you go out bidding, so you again have another opportunity to, talk about some of the project dynamics. But you'd want to give them some pretty big chunks. Like if you told them we want to keep Broadway and 6th the same, we'd want to know that at the time you authorize plans and specs, rather than having them spend the time and the resources to design a different type of project. So.
Sounds good. So let's start with scope. I think that this is great. I think this is gonna be a really lovely entry gateway into our city. So general scope, does anybody have any?
I'm glad it's
No,
going
we're
down.
hitting all the
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
marks with what we
Here
need
you
to
go.
do with this corridor. Yeah.
Okay, that was easy. On to lighting. Christy shared her thoughts. Does anybody else feel strongly about lighting?
If you're taking them from 150 to 300, I'm fine with that. I mean, it's pitch black on there right now. And so, I mean, what light we can get is fine. But if 300 is your minimum, let's just roll with it.
I'm glad to hear that it's more than normal. Yeah, it's farther spread out there, so that suffices for me.
Okay, so if anybody else has any issues with lighting, going once?
Nope.
Twice?
Love the trail lighting.
Okay, so we're good on the lighting as proposed. 6th and Broadway, I don't have any issues with removing a stop sign and kind of curving the north side of that intersection and really just letting it be a little bit less of a restricted intersection as the long term.
As long as it's signed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah, I concur. I think, just kind of seeing some of the proposed signage coming into this intersection so that we kind of understand what people are gonna see going into it. We think that that's gonna be sufficient for calming. I like the idea of getting rid of the stop sign there and making that a more understandable intersection. Right, for somebody who doesn't drive it very often, coming into that intersection, like, where does that road go? Oh, not really anywhere, right? And it's not really obvious there, and this is much more clear, this is how you get to downtown.
Yeah, I'll add that. It is a good point. I should have some chevrons on the other side of that. Is really what you should have. If you look into Cologne, where you come to the end of the highway, and there's those arrows pointing in. That's the type of treatment we'll probably have to have on this, but I'll add that for you.
So pending kind of where we land here, that's maybe a figure we could add for the next meeting so they could see that before they even sign off on it.
Yeah, I can show exactly how we'd sign it under this
Perfect.
configuration.
Be great.
I actually like the curb coming down from Broadway because it is sort of no man's land right in there. You know, I know where it goes, I live down here, Glenn knows where it goes, Lori knows where it goes, we drive this road a little more.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but you know, when we're down here more, you sort of know, yeah, it looks like a little no man's land, kind of,
Yes,
we're like,
you're like, where
what
am
is
I
this?
going?
so I do like that curve. I guess we're willing to try this, right? And you said that there's different mediation we can use for pedestrian awareness in the area. I can move forward with that, okay.
Lori, thoughts?
Yeah, I liked McKnight's comment about making it more understandable intersection. And definitely even just having that crosswalk and just that line kind of showing that it's almost really just it's a hard intersection to describe. I can't imagine the first time when somebody's there. So some of these things just to make it more understandable.
Okay. Yeah.
The person who cut from north to south on 6th Street was me, so I don't know if Glenn ratted me out or what, but that's me. But yeah, I think that'll help and make it a clearer intersection. So I hear us all being okay with 6th and Broadway as presented.
Mm-hmm.
And then timeline, are you good?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were trying to pipe up. Timeline, I would love to be able to see this for plans and specs in 2 weeks if we can, if that's not too quick of a timeline, but knowing that we're kind of facing some
Fine for
challenges.
us.
Okay,
Yeah.
especially since we haven't changed much.
No.
Okay.
You're just authorizing to start work, they're not gonna be,
Right.
other than that additional
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that works.
Anybody else have thoughts? Go ahead.
Is the drainage on the south side of the corridor, north of my house, is that being addressed where they actually have the drains, where the water has to run uphill to get to the drain in order to hit the drains?
Think of where that.
South
Aaron,
side or
west
north
side,
side?
is that jumping off?
West of your house, Glenn?
West of my house on the south
South.
side, there's an area where the water is a big settlement pool below the Lenzen development up there.
Yeah, where that retaining wall.
And it kicks out to the street, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking at that area specifically. That's in that one flooding picture where the speed limit sign is, where it kicks onto the road.
There, but
Yeah, we're looking at that whole ditch system going all the way down.
Okay.
And specifically, we're going to be building in emergency overflow, so it'll continue in the ditch before it goes into the road is what the
all right,
plan is, so.
all right, I'm good.
Let's see, I just had a couple
I have
questions.
a comment on the timing.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to see us move as soon as we can, just also because of the way the world is as far as supply chain. But also, and kind of like it's two things, is October, end of October. But I know in August, September, there's gonna be a lot of rumblings about interrupting steamboat days. But I don't see us able to really move this up to accommodate that.
Because the entire parade route is Sixth
Yeah.
Street.
Very good point.
So if we
Alright.
could, that.
Completion date, September 1st.
But that might be really hard.
All right, so we're gonna have to start thinking about that here.
Yeah, that would be
more vigorously on the completion date side of things, because the reclaim is not gonna take very long. You're talking a week and a half. By the time they rip up the pavement and put it back down again, it's not gonna go 2 weeks. There's a lot of little putsy work on the walls, and that's stuff that takes so long. It takes forever to get blocked right now, and so.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we should almost think about writing something into the contract where it has to be done by.
Yes,
But
we're gonna have to have
more
an interim,
usable.
we're gonna have to have an interim completion date for steamboat day, as the condition has to be this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
for
It has to
steamboat
be
days,
put
and then
down.
if we don't get it done, we'll have to finish the rest after, or we're gonna have to get the whole thing done with steamboat.
Yep.
No, that's another good point.
And then
We'll
we'll
get for plans and
A
specs.
similar thing on the timing is, just in the communication. I noticed that with the JCP, that when people thought it's done, but we can drive on it, done. A lot of people meant more just the optics of, all the landscape, but just to maybe kind of I don't know the best way to communicate that, but maybe there's a drivable done and it might happen
Yeah.
spring of 2023, but like when does it got that curb appeal?
Yeah.
Oh, I see what
But-
you did there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But, I think we did great on the JCP with the communication, but just one thing that I learned, and maybe we can get ahead of that.
Gotcha, yeah, that's a good point. We call it substantial completion and final, but
Substantial completion.
substantial is when you can use it, but final is when it looks like it's supposed to.
Okay.
We've come up with a more understandable term here for the communication side of that though.
Okay, we're good on the timeline?
Yes, thanks
Okay,
for
I just had
letting me comment.
Couple other questions. You talked about the frozen runoff. That will absolutely completely be taken care of, and that will no longer be an issue once we make these improvements.
Well, yeah, you're forced to guarantee it, yeah. I like to say we're going to take care of the issue.
Okay.
The design is designed to capture all the water as we know it to be, generated by the runoff, and, we're gonna get it into our drain tile. That being said, Gopher crawls into our 12-inch sewer and backs it up. I mean, those are just things beyond normal
Versus
that
nature.
happen, but the design would handle the runoff,
Okay.
yes.
And the other thing that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into, you mentioned something about Lylewood Parkway being its own situation there. Would there ever be a need for a stop sign there, or at what point would we look into putting a stop sign there?
Question?
A four-way stop on that?
Because it's
Yes.
two-way, right?
That's what you're talking
Yeah.
about, okay.
It's a good question. I mean, it comes down to whether or not we'd have an all-way stop justification is really what it comes down to. With the collector street, you generally try and avoid all-way stops because you're trying to move people down those collectors, and then you put in the stop sign when it's warranted. I would have to think through a little bit more about where our warrants would trigger that. I don't think
Okay.
it's traffic right now, but
I don't-
I can consider it a little bit more as
And
to what the warrants would be.
I've heard from a couple of folks who kind of live in that area and concerns with kids along 6th Street, but I don't know if it's just that I've been paying more attention, but now that there's the roundabout, the speeds at which folks fly off of that and then down 6th Street, I wonder if that would be an additional traffic calming feature.
Yeah.
Again, like understanding for folks to blow through at a high rate of speed, but just a thought, and I'm curious as to what your kind of clinical thoughts would be on,
Yeah.
really looking into that there.
Good question. Let me think about it a little
Okay.
bit more as to, where the warrants would actually be triggered on that. It comes down to, is the stop sign warrants is really what they call them, and look at the volumes of traffic and such, but, yeah, I'll think about it, get back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Can you do Ironwood Drive in 20 minutes?
You
We can at
betcha.
least get a good start, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, moving on to Ironwood Drive project overview.
Alrighty, so let's switch this over. Alright, go. Come on. Oh, it's already up. Okay. Let's see, there it is. There's my little screen. Okay. This one is 15 minutes. I've already got pre-programmed, 5
Don't waste
minutes.
any time, let's go.
If I go 5 minutes in 1 second here, you let me know.
You know I will.
I will.
It's been 4 minutes. You can move on. All right. Ironwood Drive here. So here's where we're sitting. So when I'm talking about this, I'm talking really about the extension to the west of the school access point. Obviously, this has been rebuilt, reconfigured based on the JCP effort. So we've got this segment through here, and then plus the Timber Creek segment do with development. So this is all, oh shoot, laser pointer. There we go. So, school access, this would be the city modification portion. This is the segment in the Timber Creek development. And there's a couple of subtle things we'll talk about as we discuss funding. So here is the vision for Ironwood Drive. And again, this comes out of some of the JCP planning that was done here to assume that we were going to have a little bit of modification to Ironwood to line up with JCP. So we had some money set aside for potential improvements depending on what was needed with JCP. So there was some bonding money that was, I guess, accommodated for tying in with the development, is what I think I'll really call it. And so what we have here is we've got this segment, which would be the city side. We've got the development, which would have some city contributions. So this is the overall improvement. It would be adding medians from the school entrance all the way to Boulder. And so what we have in here is just a retrofit on the existing roadway to add medians. And then in the Timber Creek area, we had them widen this out a little bit to add a median section that we consider to be somewhat of an aesthetic amenity, plus also a calming feature in front of the new park. And so we felt it really lended itself towards a parkway feel. So for us, it was a bit of a stretch to tell the developer you had to do it for function. We thought that was probably over the top to say absolute necessity. But we did get them to widen this thing out, and kind of worked out an arrangement where we'd be willing to contribute to medians if you do the widening section in here, because we feel it's a more amenity to the park feature and the overall intention of the corridor. And then this would be also some retrofit medians in here. So the project would add the medians with landscape, so some trees and such right in front of the park. And then there would be some turn lanes in here. We'd be putting in medians in here again in front of the school where there's gore striping right now. This was kind of left unfinished, so this would tie it all together. There'd be developer street lighting, which they are putting in. That would be their cost to add street lighting to their segment of roadway. What's in blue would be retrofitting the rest of Ironwood Parkway with the same street lighting. So this would actually be lit pretty close to the same standard as what you see for Monroe. And so we're actually recreating the Monroe corridor with divided roadway with lighting and some median landscaping.
And those are closer to that 150 distance that you would.
Yes, that's about half the distance that we're talking about on 6th Street. So again, that was to Brent's comment, some of the differences in standards. So what we're doing is we are adding a fair amount of lighting at the school entrance where the kids are crossing early in the morning or possibly later in the afternoon when it gets darker. So this is pretty well lit right in this corridor. The rest of it is just a standard spacing that we would use to do roadway lighting, such as on Monroe. Yellow, developer; blue, city; median is effectively city, is the short of it. So this is really the job. The rest of the road's going to happen whether we wanted it to or not. It's going to be a developer street extension. It's really what do we want the street to look like when we're all done. And so this is really the project, is to put in medians and some landscaping and such, and to delineate it a little bit more like it is to, if you looked back at the other segment, to make it more like Ironwood Drive up to GCP, which includes the divided median.
One of the silver linings, if you want to skip back to this slide, is as some of you may remember, there's been some consternation regarding parking on Ironwood Drive, because it's really just kind of a dead end right now, and so this effectively ends that issue because of the median work. And then, Dan, can you speak to that left-hand turn lane? Because I think we lengthened that a little bit.
Here?
Yeah, to plan for elementary school access from the west, correct?
Yes. Yep, I'll hit that. The turn lane right now is too short for what it would need to be in the future. Once you had all that development coming in here, that turn lane was just sort of striped in there just because there's nobody there. It didn't really have any design to it. At this point, it's designed to handle the amount of traffic that might be coming from the west in the future. So yes, we lengthened it out quite a bit.
And, you know, something to consider is when Ironwood went into this point, the elementary school wasn't on the radar at this location. The kind of proposed site was kind of to the southwest, kind of at 40 and 11 intersection. And so at the time, there were a lot of concessions made by the city in this related to the street width. Frankly, a lot of street lighting was pulled just to kind of get that Copper Hills and that whole CDA development in at the time. So to Dan's point, a lot of this is retrofit at this point.
So what you'd end up with is a divided parkway environment is when you're done. Is meetings in front of the park, some trees, lighting along both sides of it. Your major ped crossing points would be as a little crossing here, which we don't expect many people to use, but at least it gives them a little safe harbor in the middle. You'd be surprised at how big of a deal that is when you can stop in the middle and say oops before trying to run the rest of the street. So that is helpful to have the median for that, but it's not a very busy crossing. But the same concept here in front of the school itself. We've got the crossing in there. So
I have a question on the Ironwood Drive with the landscape. Would that continue as development happens west, or just this segment?
Just this segment. So the Ironwood, once you get west of Boulder, it kind of terminates as a collector. It only runs as what we consider a collector through Boulder.
yeah. So what we ended up doing is because this has been developed going way back when, we're trying to avoid some of the issues I've seen in other cities where this becomes a collector with driveways on it, and there's constant complaints about speeds and things of that nature. Boulder wants to be a collector to a degree. It's going to be to carry a lot of traffic north and south. That being said, we're making this an always stop. We're checking traffic at this location with a distinct delineation that they've gone from a no-access roadway to driveways. And so this is where they kind of enter the developments, where driveways are. And so we're trying to respect the conditions that have existed for many years and yet still maintain the collector environment on a couple of these roads. So this is how we did it. So
there will be driveways on Ironwood west of Boulder on Ironwood. Will there be driveways onto Ironwood there?
There's
Yes.
driveways here, there's driveways here.
That's what I thought.
There's no driveways up here.
Yeah.
So this is gonna feel like a collector, this is all gonna feel like a collector. They're gonna hit this point and feel like they're driving more into a neighborhood, although it's still gonna kind of be a collector.
And that section of Boulder gets you to Monroe, so you can still
Yeah.
follow that collector path, if you will.
Yeah,
And there's a median on Ironwood between JCP and Harwell right now, correct?
yeah,
It's a raised median?
yes.
I can't see it in my mind. So it's the median that you're proposing for that first section, kind of the city section, if you will, versus the developer section of Ironwood, would be the same kind of
Exactly.
raised, okay.
We just continue the median to the west of,
Okay.
the school entrance.
And then is there a stop sign on whatever that is, Red Rock, River Rock, the street to the east of Boulder? There,
This one?
Yeah.
New.
North and south.
Side
There's
street.
north, okay,
This is through, this
but
is
not
side
on
street.
Ironwood,
This is always stop.
okay,
This is side street only.
okay.
And the school entrance, one thing I'll note is what we're dealing with on the school is we're striping this, that this is the designated school pedestrian crossing. It's not on this side of the road, and that was to avoid all the inbound, outbound doing that, and trying to keep pedestrian traffic away from that high volume of turning traffic. So everything is supposed to come over here, and then you go across over here, past again, the entering traffic. So it's all set up for that type of end product. And how would this be funded? Again, about $250,000 was set aside for JCP to accommodate the county work. We've accommodated this in the budgets to date. All the things that we talked about on 6th Street, we're not starting over again and using the same money twice. This is another $250 that would be associated with JCP. The developer's pricing is pushing all of this. So we're getting to that mark, but, give or take a light pole, I think we're gonna be right about at that 250 with what we're getting back from them, so
Okay.
it's pretty close to the real number at this point.
All right.
So that's it, so all you have to do is comment and say okay, and then spring it.
Just say
go.
okay.
Just say okay. I like this. I think that this is great. I like the idea of the trees a little bit closer to the entrance to that parking lot for the future expansion area. Because I like the idea of a more park-like look there. I also think that the increased lighting is something that was brought up during the feedback session for the expansion of Ironwood Park. So we heard that, and I think that that'll scratch the itch a little bit for folks who are looking for more lighting in Ironwood Park too. So I like it. Anything else? I want to
Looks
just say
good.
okay.
No, it looks fabulous, I think.
Well,
I have a question, and this one's for Brent. So I like the plan. I think it's good. I don't actually have any other comments on that. But when I'm looking at this one and the previous plan we just looked at, when we're looking at how we're funding it with JCP and the bonding, so are we overshooting our bonding by that far? I mean, this is over $1 million that we're going to be putting towards 6th Street and Ironwood here out of the JCP project.
We plan for these improvements within that scope of that project.
Okay, so this was all part of that whole big thing. Okay.
Yep, we wanted to, now there are, the parkway, I would say like the parkway piece we didn't talk about,
Okay.
but we planned for lane additions on Ironwood Drive, just knowing that it was congested in there, and so, I would say the lane pieces were planned, 6th Street was planned,
Okay.
but the addition you'll see is that bond premium provided some additional effort, and then I think to your point, there is a kind of, I think recent history tells us in the city hall that the council was concerned about coming back later and saying, hey, we need more money, so that was kind of emblazoned into the engineers' minds, like they're not gonna be over, or they're not gonna be under budget, and so you're gonna find that our projects, at this point, the methodology is to carry a heavier contingency to avoid being in a position where we're coming back to you saying, we're 200,000 short, what's our plan? Now, that's kind of a art and a science, right? So sometimes we're gonna be right at kind of the whisker's edge, and sometimes it's gonna appear to be a heavy contingency. So if, that's something that we're open to getting ongoing feedback from the council on, like, hey, too much, or like we're okay with every once in a while you coming back and saying, hey, this is over budget by 150,000, and we need to come back with a contingency financing plan. That's the kind of feedback that we need. But that's kind of our methodology right now, is to under-promise, over-deliver on budget.
And I'll add, just because I've looked at these numbers so much, if you take off that bond premium, this almost lines up exactly with how it was planned, with 6th Street, the dollar set aside for that, and Ironwood, the dollar set aside for potential issues to tie in. That bond premium is what put us to this point, that we actually have a little bit more scope right now to utilize that funds, because we did use some of the contingency on JCP, but also add on 10 projects, you won't use it, and you'll end up with excess money on bonding. That one project that you don't have it is the one where you gotta come back and say, how are we gonna bond for an extra $500,000, and that's the difficult thing. So it's a fair point, but you will overrun a majority of your jobs on this
And
plan.
like anecdotally, the 2019 improvement project, we know where we did water and sewer, and then as an addition, we're probably gonna be putting approximately $200,000 of funding back into that debt service. So we didn't spend it on the project, but it'll be used then to pay off the debt on it.
Okay.
So that's kind of an example. City Hall, we spent it right down to zero. We have a couple other miscellaneous things that we have to take on. So a lot of it is project dependent. We're working with a partner on Jonathan Carver Parkway, and so there could be a couple of like spring surprises with budget and who pays for what next
So is there additional contingency money then that's left over if that were to happen outside of this 1,150,000?
This is at this point planned as we expect that job to close out. I mean, we're getting down to the point where if they did anything crazy to us and said you owe an extra $200,000 outside the agreement, that we'd be back visiting on this. And because that would actually influence it. But we're to the point where the job is close to done.
Okay.
And we
So
can
you
say,
don't see
we can make,
major-
I have to estimate that we might have 175 left. Maybe it's 200, maybe it's 150, but it's not gonna be 400, is what I would be presenting to you at this point. And so there's a little uncertainty, but it's getting down there to the point where I think these numbers are pretty
But
accurate.
if we have 100, let's say they come to us with $100,000 of something we have to do yet, do we have enough money yet from this bonding and this contingency to cover that along with these projects?
Well, at some point you get into a piece depending upon where it is, you know. I don't know if, we'd have to do some analysis if $100,000 is the breaking point, or if it's 200,000, we'd have to come back. But based on what we know, and there isn't a lot left with Jonathan Carver Parkway, I think we feel pretty good about where we're at. I mean, frankly, talking about the 6th Street, now Dan might not want me to say this, but like the number is based on this, that 2.6 is based on this, like, let's not be, when the bids come in, let's not have our budget out of whack. So there's a healthy contingency in there. So I would, like, when I look at it, I'm not expecting that bid to be at 2.6. And so I feel even more confident about that $100,000 surprise, because I'm not expecting the city would have to use $100,000 out of the special capital fund just based on how the engineers build our construction budgets, which is kind of, I mean, that's the nice part. You're not hanging on every single issue that might come up in construction. It's like you plan for a lot of the worst case scenarios. There's always could be one more that throws everything out of whack, but we've built up a budget that can tolerate some surprises, and I think that in the end that puts us in a better position.
Is that a clear question? Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay.
Can I go, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I support it, but I do have a question just kind of on this topic. If this didn't come to our attention, or like if it just didn't work out, like what we didn't need it, you know, it didn't make sense to do. Are there other things that like are on your radar where you're like, okay, we have this, you know, funding available. It would be nice to, you know, make this area better, or like do something different here. And I'm just asking so that like, if down the road, so the dollars are there, that then like, or like when I drive by things, sometimes I'm like, oh, it'd be nice if this did that, but I just don't know like what project that would tie into how it would be funded. Like if there's things that are already like on your radar that makes sense
Like,
to
can
you.
it be used somewhere else, or can it
Yeah.
only be used in this
Yeah.
location?
So maybe not this one, but maybe in future projects, if we're in this situation again, rather than, you know, haven't really driven down the area other than when, you know, I guess this didn't come to my attention until I saw it, you know, which is why we have work sessions, which is nice, until I saw it in the packet. But if there's something that we think we might be in this situation again, that I could just kind of start like either, you know, getting feedback or just kind of like driving purposely, intentionally, looking just for
You
areas.
understand that we planned for this, right? We planned to make these improvements when we went out for bonding?
We plan to make these exact
Yes.
ones?
Yes.
I think there was just probably such level of detail, but
So okay, maybe we planned
we were
for these
hoping,
improvements.
we're hoping we could do it.
We went out for bonding.
I can jump in like
Yeah.
So for the street reconstruction bonds that we use, we specifically listed these streets. So we listed Monroe, Ironwood, 6th Street, Dahlgren, and Jonathan Carver Parkway as kind of part of the project.
Yeah.
In some instances, when we do like a 429 project, like the 2019 project, if we have another 429 project, we can take excess funds and move them over.
Okay.
I did ask our bond counsel, so that's our attorney that kind of manages the bonds, if we could transfer money from the street reconstruction reconstruction to use on something else. And she said that we couldn't because of the street reconstruction bond status, which was frustrating to Dan because he had an idea for the use of those funds.
I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but it didn't happen. I was gonna lose that one.
Well, she's been doing it for like 30 years, so.
Yeah,
But
so the answer was no.
So the council member serious, but sometimes you can in the instance of how we borrowed for these projects with the street reconstruction bonds. We can only do projects on Monroe, Ironwood, 6, Jonathan
Yeah.
Carver Parkway, and Dahlgren, and related.
But did you have actual detail like this, or was it just like saying the name of the street?
We didn't show plans, we just showed we listed the streets and the budget.
Budget, okay.
But the intention of adding this street was you knew that we were going to be adding congestion at this intersection.
Yeah, I mean, if you
It's
had,
gonna need to be addressed.
if the council, or if you had like a scope that you wanted to add within the confines of those handful of streets, we
Yeah.
could certainly entertain that, but we couldn't use these funds
Wrote the
do it-
pavement management plan.
to do a mill and
Yeah.
overlay on 4th Street.
Right.
So that would be an example. So I don't know if there's something, a project that's coming to mind that you'd like us to entertain or take a look at?
No, there
Oh,
isn't, but
okay.
that's why if there was for still, within the project or on others' mind, I want to know, just so then I could start thinking about that.
Sure. I would say like Dan or Aaron or Chad, you could jump in, like, as it relates to streets, I think everybody in this room has done a lot of work related to the pavement management plan, so that would be encapsulated within that. And then, thinking about the Casaf 40 turnback and the 3rd Street Bridge, those are probably our biggest street projects on the horizon. 3rd Street and 40, and then the pavement management plan projects. Each of those, interesting enough, each of those projects has its own kind of different financing model. Where 3rd Street has bridge bond funds that Dan's kind of working through, and Aaron. Casaf 40 or Main Street is a turnback, which is kind of another piece. And so sometimes some of these synergies work together, and you can kind of cross the funds. And in the 3 examples that I listed there, Jonathan Carver Parkway or the reconstruction bonds, the 3rd Street Bridge and Casaf 40 turnback, they're all kind of separate, and you can't connect those funding sources and use them on top of each other. But if there are projects, I don't know if there are any projects outside of those that we're thinking of that, are on the horizon.
Don't think too hard.
Yeah, you got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes to think hard.
I think you covered it well. I mean, I'd just say, we do try and minimize the time CEQA out for bonding, so, some of that was tied into this.
Got it. No, thanks for talking me through that.
All right, do you have what you need from us on that? I think we
Absolutely.
gave you that okay that you were
And
looking
I
for.
heard that good enough, just go
Okay.
build it.
All right.
All right, 2 minutes updates.
Go ahead.
Ready? Go. Chrissy's having it.
Talk to Dr. Holder. As you know, Carver Dental is going to be awarded the Greg Osterbeck Community Service Award. They just have a scheduling conflict, so we're going to recognize them at the January 3rd meeting rather than December 22. At your next work session, we're going to talk about the organizational resolution, primarily of interest to the council's commission assignments, meetings, etc. So if you want to think about that. You'll notice we have some ceiling tile out where Chad's working on some HVAC issues related to City Hall. And there's some pressure and some heating issues, so we're working our way through that. At your next work session, the team's going to be coming back with that trunk area charge, kind of new development areas, concept, and with some information the council asked for. You may notice probably in the next month or two, there's a kind of a little string of fence where those planters are in front of City Hall, that we don't have a fence section, and we've had, I would say, 2 to 3 times where folks have unfortunately fell in that area, because there's a little bit of a lip there. And so, we're moving forward with this, extending that fence section, just, we feel like we're one or less incidents away from someone really getting hurt there, and so, you might see some work there. And then, Aaron Smith and I met with the CDA regarding kind of their, senior housing, affordable housing project, and so we're gonna be having them come in to meet with the planning commission and city council, just not to propose like what they're doing, but just to kind of give an overview of what their project goals are. The county board has provided some additional funding for those projects, and we just kind of wanted to make that project and their development plans kind of front and center for the planning commission and the city council. We're expecting maybe we could have something to look at sometime in 2022. Did I make it?
Christie? It's 8:51. I mean, it's not 8:51, it's 6:51, sorry.
I think it's a yes. So we'll, council request to the regular meeting, and then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Mock, second by Councilmember Henry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?